All right, everybody. Boker Tov. Today's stuff is Yutet 19. We pick up in the middle of Yochanan with Bet, and we are dealing with actually the very top of Yochanan with Bet, and we're dealing now with Ame Ivriya and Abed Ivri and comparisons and differences. And now we're also focusing in on this issue of Yud. About that even leaves no Yadena, Asher Lo Yada, that Wudi Kesef, the young girl, she's under 12, who's bought as a slave. It seems like the primary goal was that in order that she should get married to the guy, and that's called Yud. He chooses to make her into his wife, or he can do it for his son. So now we're going to have from here for the rest of today, finishing yesterday's daf and today's daf, will really focus on this issue of Yud. So let's take a look. We start about 6 lines from the top on Yochanan with Bet. Boy Rabbi Baravua asked, Yud nisun osa o ersin osa. Right, we've had similar questions. If by Kiddushin Bia, we wanted to know, since that creates that immediate intimacy and physical connection, Kiddushin usually is a stage before she's living together. They're living together in the same home. So we had that question whether Kiddushin Bia goes all the way straight to Nisuin. Here, the Gemara is asking a similar question. She's living in his house as a slave, but she's living in his house. Now he does Yud. Is that really a stage prior to the Nisuin, or does that automatically create the reality that they're living in the same home, and that's Nisuin? Okay, so does the Yud create Erisin or create Nisuin?
Rabbi Linzer,
yes.
I already have a question.
Yes.
Just dawned upon me. If it Yud, it really is the goal is a potential marriage. So ostensibly.
Right.
So does the Av have to be in debt to the person, or can he just, in other words, indenture his daughter because he wants that marriage?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, well, first of all, it's not at all, even if the father is selling his daughter primarily because he needs the money, it's not clear that he owes money to this person. He might owe to creditors, and he's selling her to someone else so that he can pay off his creditors, number one. But would a father do it if he had no financial obligations, just because he thought it was a path towards Kiddushin?
That's my question.
Maybe. It's hard to imagine, though, because even though the Torah goes out of its way, the point of the Torah is to emphasize that this girl deserves the same degree of respect and dignity and protection and rights. Nevertheless, one has to imagine that is not, one would much more get married the normal way than through the route of slavery. So anyway, all right. By Rabbi Baravua, Yud Nisunoso Eirusinosa. Nafkamina, what would be the nafkamina? All the nafkaminas of being a Nesua. If she dies, does he inherit her? If she dies, then he's a Kohen. Is he matami to her? Can he annul her vows? Could also have asked about his obligations to her to provide, support, etc. Sherak suta vonata, all the realities of nisuin. Does that kick in right away, or is there needed a separate stage? Okay. Now, nafti, what do you say? Tashma. Vigdova, what we discussed yesterday, that he cannot sell her after, there cannot be like shifchus after shifchus or shifchus after ishus, depending on how you read the pasuk. So one way we read the pasuk is kivin shapires taliso alaha shuveno shayla mochra. The Vigdo reading word is beged. Once he spread his garment over her, he cannot sell her. So the father cannot sell his daughter after a shifchus, which became a yud. Okay, so that's shifchus achar ishus. But the ishus came through this act of yud. Now, how is that relevant? So it says, so what he can't do is he can't sell her after this yud, if then the master dies. He could be miyad her again, which really means he could be mikadish her again. Okay, via Marta nisuinosa, but 1 minute. If the yud created nisuin, even in Isa is shuin levia reshuspa. So once there's nisuin, the father has no longer any rights over her, right? So what we discussed yesterday was, here's this girl, okay? She gets sold to the guy, okay? Here's the father, okay? Here's dad, okay? Anyway, so she gets sold to him, okay? And then that becomes yud, okay? So now that's ishus. Now she's his married, okay? Then he dies, okay? And then it says the father can't sell her again. Right? Okay? So which means, right? So now he dies, he can't sell her again. So that means there's no shifchus achar ishus, right? That's what we did yesterday, right? Everybody with me here?
Yep.
Okay. So point is, fine. but that suggests, I'll say it's a little different than the Gemara, that suggests there's a specific isser for him to now sell her again as a slave. But fundamentally, she's still under his control after the master dies. She fundamentally is still under the control of the father. So, for example, the father might be able to now be Makadish her. Okay? It's so, because basically it's clear she's under his control. The Torah is just telling us he's not allowed to sell her again as a slave. All right? But the point is, how is she now back under the father's control? If this Yiyud created Nisuin, then once a girl has had Nisuin, she's totally out of the father's control.
You didn't put big dough on her, by the way, in the picture.
Oh, well, that's a good point. Okay, anyway, so it says, okay. So why do you need a pasuk to prevent him from doing something after Yiyud if she's already in a sewer? She's out of the father's control. So the Gemara says, Elalash, I mean, not Erisino, so you see that it makes only Eris. Pretty good proof.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Kiddushin to Almakai. No. We're not talking about the Vigdova that he became her husband through a Yiyud after Shifchus. We're talking about a completely different scenario. There's a very weak read of the Breita. If the father had already done Kiddushin with her, and Big Doba, not about the context of Yiyud, but Big Doba, general context of somebody who became her husband. If the father had already married her off, and it was just Kiddushin, and then the husband died, then he can't sell her. Okay, so what we're saying is this idea that it's saying that after this guy dies, after Kiddushin, he can no sell her, is not talking about the case in the Parsha, about that he initially sold her as a shifcha. It's talking about there was Kiddushin. Okay? Is telling you, after Kiddushin to another man, and then he dies, and now she was just going back to the father because it was only Kiddushin, he can't sell her as a slave. The father can sell his daughter as a slave if she was never married before, but if he had once married her earlier, he can't sell her as a slave.
If she was never Mekudeshet.
But the Torah is not talking about a scenario where there had been Yiyud. Okay, obviously a very hard read in the Breita. Anyway, now we go. So that's was ostensibly, not ostensibly, it really was a good proof that the Yiyud did not create Nisuin. But we said we're not talking about Yiyud, we're talking about Kiddushin. Okay, Toshma, Ein Mocher Likrovim. You cannot sell her to relatives because then there's no possibility of Yiyud. Rabbi Eliezer says you can't sell like your brother. Your brother, right. Your father, your brother, your son. Okay. But even though there's a question, can you sell it to a relative where Kiddushin would not be tofes? If you would try to do Yiyud, it wouldn't even take effect. Everybody agrees you can sell it to a man that there's an isser for her to marry or him to marry her, but that Kiddushin would still take effect if it was done. What's a case where there's an isser to marry, but Kiddushin would still take effect? And it's not a relative, but it's an isser lav, like a Kohen to an almana, Kohen gadol to a almana, Kohen to a grush, etc. That he can do, and even though it would be usher to do the Yiyud is still theoretically possible because it would take effect. Okay.
Why is there a Tashmaya? They're still trying to prove the original point.
Yep, they're trying to prove whether it's Nisuin or Eris.
And they're still working on that.
Yep. Okay. Now, Hi Almana Hechidami. Now, what's the case that the father is selling his daughter, who is an almana, as a slave? Okay, how did she become an almana? If she became an almana through this underage girl marrying herself and then her husband died, almana karilei, how could you call her an almana? The Kiddushin wasn't even binding. A girl can't an underage girl can't marry herself. The Ella the Kichavia must be that her father married her off to some guy, and the guy died, and now she's an almana. Now the question is, can he marry her off again to a Kohen Gadol? So mimatzi mazbinla. 1 minute. But if the father had initially married off to some guy, how could we now be discussing? And then the guy died, and she's an almana. How could we be discussing him marrying her off again? Him selling her as a shifcha. That would be a case of shifcha sachar ishus, which we're assuming, like the Tana who says that that's not legitimate. Okay? So we have this father marrying his daughter, who's either an almana or a grusha, to a Kohen Gadol or Kohen. So how did she become an almana or a grusha? Must be had married her once, and then the guy died. That's fine, but then the guy died, and then or divorced her for 1 minute. How? But if the father had already married her once, he can't sell her now as a slave. Ain't shifcha sachar ishus. That's whether it's Kiddushin or Nisuin. Ain't shifcha sachar ishus. So what's the scenario that he could be selling her now as a slave and
When
she's an
she's an
almana or a
almana.
gerusha? Because ain't shifchus achar ishus. So what's the case? Okay. The Amar of Amanam Yitzchak Hacha beHekdusha Yiyud. The Alibud of Yosef Reb Yehuda. The Amar Masu Rishon Slav the Kiddushin Nitnu. Here's how it works. Here's the scenario where he could be selling her and she's an almana. She became an almana through an initial sale as a shifcha. Okay, so she was sold here as a shifcha. It started off as a shifcha. Okay, and then this guy did yield. Now, was the father in this scenario Makadesh or not? Because the halacha is the father can't sell her a second time as a slave if he sold her once as Kiddushin. So in this case, did the father create the Ishus?
According to this, no, because of the money, because of that money was not
so the
in money
question
for
here
Kiddushin.
is the yield that the guy does, is that something that's happening now, later, once the father is out of the picture? And then the father never sold her for Ishus. Okay, or are we saying that the yield that's done harkens back to that original sale, and that money of that original sale now becomes kesef kiddushin, and therefore the father did sell it for it as ishus?
They're making a chiluk between those.
Yeah. So what we're saying is, if we say most rishonos lav kiddushin, okay, and therefore the father did not sell her as ishus. The father sold her as shivchos. Then the ishus came later, and then this guy dies, and then she becomes and now she's an almana. Okay, so now the father can sell her as a slave, because the father would be selling her. I mean, it would be shifchus achar shifchus, because the father originally sold her as a shifchus, but it wouldn't be shifchus achar ishus. The father had never been mekadesh her. The guy was mekadesh her. The father was never mekadesh her. So the father can now sell her as a slave. And we can discuss selling his daughter, who's an almana or a grusha, to a kohen or to a kohen.
According to that, only applies if he does it again.
Well, or if he did it the first time, right? If he did it the first time. In this case, if this yield is a new thing, he never sold her for ishus in the first time. Okay, that was something that happened separately. Yes.
Can a Kohen marry whatever? There was Amana Mina Erison?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we differentiate this case at all between Kiddushin versus Nisuin? Like why? I mean, I see the word doesn't, but I would think that should.
What about Amana? No, because it's different.
I know, but Mocha Adam Bito,
Well, there's no basis for it. I mean, whatever. Oh, because you're saying because the issue of Bevigdo Va is well, that's an interesting question. If Vigdo Va suggests Nisuin, maybe to understand the Israel to be only after Nisuin, but then that gets to that can't be, because then the Gemara then you wouldn't need a pasuk, because then she would already be out of his Rishus if it was already Nisuin.
Weren't we saying that when the father sells her, he's expecting that or hoping that she's going to be married to the guy?
What?
That was the purpose.
No,
of
that's the
selling
way
her?
I understand it. Yeah, but that
So
doesn't
then-
mean that
so
that
if you were
doesn't
making a
that might have
distinction-
been the goal, but that doesn't mean that was what the act was. The act was not a kiddushin. The act the father did was selling her as a
But it never happened when he first sells her. Even with that goal, it's never going to happen at the beginning of
Correct.
the sale, right?
Correct. But if the money of the sale becomes transformed into kesef kiddushin, it's still through an act that he did. It's still he was part of that act of kiddushin, as opposed to now we're saying that no, the whole act occurred later. Was he a party to that act? Okay. In one case, he set up the groundwork, but ultimately the guy did the act with the girl, as opposed to the other place, right? It might be, that he took the money, and later that money becomes money of kiddushin, so he did the act of kiddushin.
But I don't understand, when do you separate the one from the other? He sells his daughter, right?
He sells his
hoping
daughter.
that she's going to be married to the guy,
Right.
Right. So then, if the guy does yield, right?
Right.
Then that money becomes kesef kedushin, right?
According to one opinion, but now we're working with the opinion that the money doesn't become kesef kiddushin. That's exactly the issue. If the money became kesef kiddushin, then the father was mekadesh her and ain't shifchus achar ishus. If the money wasn't kesef kiddushin and the kesef kiddushin was a new act that happened later, okay, not based on the money that changed hands, then the father wasn't mekadesh her. Then it just happened. That's exactly the question. What is the act of kiddushin with yield? Is it the money that changed hands 3 years ago, or is it some new act that's happening now?
Even though it's the same money we're talking about. In other words, is there an additional money 3 years
No.
later?
But it might just be I'm trying to. We haven't gotten to it yet. But basically, what we would say if it happened later and not the original money is it's the fact that she still owes him service, and he's giving her back the service that's still owed, and that becomes the kesef kiddushin.
Can I call him a convert?
No.
One
Okay. Yeah.
very quick question. So he can't. The yud can happen any point along 6 years. It has to happen at the end.
No. Any point.
Okay. So she doesn't have to fit. Unlike the Evet Ivri,
Right.
like who we're saying is like under bound
Well,
by
exactly.
6-year contract.
Right.
Well,
Well,
here she's not bound.
Well, if he
by-
wants to do the yud. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this. Okay. So the reason, only way that he could be selling his daughter who's an almana or a grusha, because he's not allowed to do it if he'd already married her. The only way he could do it is if he had originally not married her off, but sold her off. Okay. Presumably there's not a problem of shifchus achar shifchus. He had only sold her off, and the money he received did not become kesef kiddushin. The kiddushin thing happened later, not based on the money he received. Okay, and that's how it's possible to discuss him marrying off his daughter, who's an almana or a grusha. Now, all of that was to get to the fact that there had been yiyud, and he was still discussing his ability to marry off his daughter. Yeah, Marta nisuin osa, and if yiyud creates nisuin, how can we be discussing his ability to sell his daughter? She's already out of his control. Kivan sheni says kivan lavi reshuspa. So that seems to be a pretty good proof that even after yiyud, she's still only an arusa. So the Gemara says, "Elamai erisino." So you want to say it does erisin? So 1 minute, the shaving shamochra. It says that they agree that that he can sell her to a as a grusha or an almana to a kohen. Okay, so we still have a problem. Okay, now I've already told you the answer to this. I don't even understand. Even if you said that you did yiyud and it only created erisin, how can you go ahead and sell her to now a kohen or a kohen gadol that's still shifchus achar ishus? She had been married. Okay, but we already know the answer. The Gemara's already said the answer is that she had been married, but he wasn't the one that married her off.
Right.
Okay. So clearly there's a difference. Did she marry herself or did her father marry her? If her father married her off, then he's not allowed to sell her again. But if she married herself, meaning the marriage happened later with the yiyud and he wasn't involved, then he would be able to sell her again. Fine. So once we've established that, I'll tell you a few tema nisuin. So even if the yiyud created nisuin, shani nisuin didam nisuin davia. It's different if she created the nisuin or her father created the nisuin. Now that's a very strange idea because the issue by having rights after nisuin isn't like, oh, you did this one act to her, you're not allowed to do another act to her. That's the idea of ein shifchus achar ishus and so on. Here, the idea is just the reality of having lived in being part of another man's household takes her out of her father's household. So whether her father did the nisuin or she did the nisuin, the reality is that she left the father's household. So he would not have any rights. And that's what the Gemara says back. Hi, my, what type of comparison is that? Bishlema, this has got to be the tersest Gemara ever about, because it doesn't even explain anything. It just sort of repeats the word. Bishlema, Erisin, Shani. Look, I can make a distinction between erisin and erisin. The erisin by the father, he's not allowed to resell her, but an erisin done by her, he is allowed to resell her. That makes a difference. Who did it? She or the father? But how can you say there's a difference between one type of nisuin and another type? Of course, the whole explanation is missing, but the point is what I said. Okay, the reason the father loses control after nisuin is not because he did it, the act of nisuin, prevents him, from doing another type of an act afterwards. It's the reality of having been in part of another man's house. Okay, so the Gemara pretty conclusively has proven, it never says explicitly, okay, you're right, it's a good proof, but it's pretty conclusively proven that since we have these discussions of shifchus achar ishus and all these types of things, which means a scenario where after yiyud, she still could be under the father's control if the master dies or divorces her or whatever, shows that even after yiyud, it's only erisin, it's not yet nisuin. Okay, so the Gemara has pretty conclusively proved that. The fact that we have to discuss that there was a kiddusha yiyud and then the guy dies, and now can the father resell her, do another case of kiddushin, another case of shivchus, shows that even after yiyud, she remains in an erisin state and not in a nisuin state.
Erisin dida here doesn't mean she sells herself. It means
Yes, it does. It means that
But she's a
if you say-
katana. How can that be?
Well,
That's
okay, we're going to
confusing.
discuss that later, okay? But about how can she do that? We're going to get up to that. But
Okay.
it still means that fundamentally it wasn't the transaction with
That
the
I get.
father,
I
it's
get.
between the two of them. Now, your
Okay.
question is how can she do it? She's a
Right.
katana. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. Okay. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar Afilu Reb Yosef Reb Yehuda Masri Shanos Kiddushin Nitnu. But 1 minute. We have a position that says, we're going to get to hopefully in a little while, that everybody agrees. Even Rabbi Yosef Reb Yehuda, we quoted before, Rabbi Yosef Reb Yehuda said that it was not the kesef of the sale that became the kesef kiddushin. It was the later, like as I was sort of mentioned, it was the unfinished labor, the remainder of the contract that became the kesef kiddushin. Okay, that's how we sort of explained this scenario, that the father never sold her off, and therefore we can talk about him marrying, about him selling her again. But if there's an opinion that says that even for Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, even for Rabbi Yosef Reb Yehuda, everybody agrees that it's the original money that became Kesef Kiddushin. So if that's true, how do we have a discussion of a father marrying his daughter who's an almana or a grusha? Because that means that the father must have married her. He must have either done Kiddushin or he must have done Shifchus, and then that money became Kesef Kiddushin. According to some opinions, everybody agrees that the money is Kesef Kiddushin, okay? The original money. So either way, the father originally married her. So if the father originally married her, how can we be discussing him now selling her as an almana or as a grusha? Ein shifchas achar ishus. And he did the original ishus. So what can it be talking about? The Gemara says, no. Mukim lo Rabbi Eliezer, da'amar l'shifchas achar shifchas u'lo mati mazbin la, aval l'shifchas achar ishus mati mazbin la. If you remember yesterday, there were different opinions. We've been consistently assuming, like Rabbi Akiva, that ein shifchas achar ishus. Maybe we think that there's shifchas achar shifchas. The only thing you can't do is shifchas achar ishus. But the Gemara says, no, there's the opposite position of Rabbi Eliezer, that shifchas achar ishus is no problem. Shifchas achar shifchas is a problem, but shifchas achar ishus is not a problem. And that's, of course, it's so funny. It was such an easy answer, right? The Gemara was sort of, agonizing over how do you have a case of him marrying her, of her selling her after she's an almana or a grusha? The answer could be, well, there's Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says shifchas achar ishus is not a problem. Okay. So now the Gemara says like this. Anyway, the Rambam paskins that Yud is Eresin Osa, which certainly is where the dominant proofs were in that Gemara. Now we have another question. By Reish Lakish, Ma'ushem Yad Adam Libno Katan. Now, the father, the guy who bought this girl, he can say, I'm going to make you my wife. That's Yud. Or he can say, you know what, I'm going to make you my son's wife. Now, here becomes an interesting question, right? Im Libno Yedani. He is the one that does the Yud for the son. So what is the role that the son has in this process? And how much does the son have to agree? How much does the son have to be an adult? Can the son be a minor? Well, yes. Can the son be a minor, right? Which is interesting because normally while we have the girl as a minor who can be in a Kiddushin D'Oraisa, we never seem to have a boy who could be in a status of Kiddushin D'Oraisa. Because normally if you're the man, you have to do the act of Kiddushin, and therefore you have to be an adult to do the act of Kiddushin.
Someone can do Kiddushin for you.
No, because there's no shlichus l'katan. Okay.
I'm saying in general. Yeah, I can say actually.
I'm saying you can never have a minor named boy
in
a Kiddushin. A girl can be in Kiddushin, a minor girl, because the father can marry her off. But a minor boy cannot because he's the agent. He can't do it himself. His act of Kiddushin is not good as a minor. He can't have an adult do it. There's no shlichus l'katan. So normally you never have Kiddushay katan. Okay, a minor boy being in Kiddushin. But here, the Torah says the father can be miyai this girl for his son. Can he do it even if his son is a minor?
If we say that the katana is in Bereshut Ha'av, is that the same as saying that the Av is the shaliach for the daughter?
No.
So then the minor boy could be Bereshut Ha'av without the Av being his shaliach.
But we normally never say that. You only have that concept about underage girls are under the.
Okay, but it's two different concepts: shlichut and reshut.
Right, but here maybe is where the Torah allowing it here.
Right.
Okay. It says you can marry her off to your son, any son, even if it's a minor. Okay. No, the son has to be like him. The son has to be an adult, meaning maybe the father is seen of like an appointed shaliach or something, but we're not changing the whole concept that for the man to enter into marriage, the man has to be an adult. He fundamentally is the one entering in. So even if a father is doing it for him, it's only when he still is an adult. Okay. So I'm a Rabbi Zeira, Tashma. Now again, we're not asking. In general, a father cannot contract marriage for his son. Even if his son is an adult, he can't unless he's been made a shaliach, and certainly for a son who's a minor. But here, maybe the Torah allows it. Okay, so what's the halacha? So Amar Rabbi Zeira Tashma, but here, ish. This is talking about the act of adultery. Isha shegin afas eishes re'eu. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, okay, or his neighbor's wife. Ish prat lekatan. If a minor commits an act of adultery, then he's not stoned, right? He's a minor, he's not liable for punishment. The reason you needed the pasuk to tell you that is because if the minor is over 9 years old, the halacha is that the halacha recognizes his act as an act of sex, not that he should be punished. He's still under the age of liability. But the woman who has sex with a minor, let's say she's a married woman that has sex with a minor who's over 9 years old, that's an act of adultery and she's put to death. Okay, so you have to tell us that even if she would be put to death, he is not. That commits adultery with as a man's wife. Okay, that so prat le'eshet katan. If a man committed adultery with the wife of a minor, he's not put to death. That's not adultery. So 1 minute, we got an interesting question. Who ever heard of the wife of a minor? Why does the Torah have to exclude that from the punishment of adultery? Where do you ever have that scenario of the wife of a minor? So the Gemara says, "Yeah, Marta miyayid." So first it assumes, well, let's say you could have a wife of a minor through yiyud, but in kei matzinu ishus lekatan. Then why is the Torah saying that you don't? It's not adultery. If the Torah is allowing for a form of Kiddushin with a minor through yiyud, then why is a person not liable for having committed adultery in that case? So the Gemara turns it around. Elamai, what do you want to say? Eino miyayid, that you cannot create yiyud with a minor. So, and there's never marriage with a minor. So if there's never the reality of marriage with a minor, why do you need the Torah to exclude it from punishment? Okay, am I coming my way? All right, well that's the question. So now we have two ways of understanding. What does it mean when the Torah says you're not liable for adultery with the wife of a minor? Is it teaching you the halacha that there is no marriage with a minor, that was never a marriage altogether, and it's teaching you a halacha that the marriage doesn't exist? You might think there's marriage. It's telling you a halacha in Hilchos Yud. You might think that a minor could be Makadesh girl. You might think that it could be Yud with a minor. Kamash Milan, there's no marriage at all. Or is it telling you there is marriage with a minor, but nevertheless, there's an exemption for the act of adultery because it's maybe not some degree of full marriage. Okay.
It could be two minors. A minor that's under 9 years old and a minor that's between 9 and 13.
Even if we're talking between 9 and 13, that's the question.
We can't be too young.
Anyway, the Gemara is assuming, which I think is the reasonable assumption, that if you needed the pasuk, when I say minor, I mean over 9. Okay, although you could ask, I guess you could ask younger,
that's why,
5.
Okay,
But it doesn't matter. We'll even take the most reasonable case. The bottom line is, the Gemara is assuming that if you needed a pasuk to say there's no liability for adultery, it shows that the institution of marriage does exist in that case. So where do you get the institution of marriage for a minor if not through yiyud? And that would prove that yiyud does create Kiddushin even for a minor. Okay, so you're so good, Michael. I'm Rav Ashi. No, there's another case where we could talk about marriage for a minor, where the guy is not where it happens a little bit more automatically. We're talking about a case of Yibum. Okay, brother died. The surviving brother is over 9 years old. Yibum happens without any intent. Remember, right? If the Gemara even has the absurd case of the guy falling off the roof. Okay, without any intent, the physical reality of the act of bia creates Yibum. If that's true. So maybe even as long as it's physically considered an act of sex, the kid's over 9, even if you don't consider him a bar das, you say there was no intent. Yibum doesn't need intent even when it's done by an adult. So the very physical reality of sex creates them as his wife. And that would be a scenario where you could have a marriage to a minor and the pasuk is addressing that. And it's not addressing the yiyud case. Okay? Biblically, she's fit, meaning that there's a zika, okay, and ma'oditema, even the midraisa chazile, there's a zika, there's an act of sex, Okay, it would be also be a habala mitchayev be'eshes. Maybe you'd be chayev for adultery. Kamash Milan that you're not. So it's the Gemara says yes, it's true. It seems like we're talking about a case of marriage to a minor, but that doesn't have to be yud. The other case where it's possible is yibum, which does not require any das, just requires the act of sex, and that maybe we're talking about. Now there's a fascinating. I'm going to answer what you're about to ask. There's a fascinating debate of Rashi and Tosfos here, which is what is the Kamash Milan? Rashi says the Kamash Milan is that even though there really, if that were to happen, a 9-year-old boy, a 10-year-old boy would have sex with his sister-in-law after the brother died, that they would be considered husband and wife, and that Kiddushin would be, the Yibum would be Chal, right? Not Kiddushin, the Yibum would be Chal, they'd be married. Nevertheless, there's an exemption from the act, from the halacha, from the punishment of adultery if another man sleeps with her. That somehow, even though they are married, it's not a full marriage. Again, it'd be nice if you could say this in a parallel way. Like if either the man or the woman, you'd like to be able to say weren't adults, then even if like on paper it's marriage, since they're not responsible yet, they can't really commit to a married life together, live what a married life together really means, then to some degree it's not yet a full marriage. It hasn't manifested as a full marriage. Okay, but if we don't say that by a girl, at least we'll say that by the boy. As long as the boy, again, in this patriarchal society where the man basically defines it, if even he is not yet, if he's not an adult yet, then even if it's legally a marriage, it's not yet a full reality of a marriage, and therefore there is still going to be an exemption from the laws of adultery, at least not punishable by death. That's the way Rashi says it. Tosfos says no. The Kamash Milan is, I might have thought that there was a marriage because there's a bia and it's yibum and all of that. Kamash Milan, this pasuk telling me that there's no liability for adultery, is telling me that it's not a marriage. Okay, that's the Kamash Milan. Okay, I know it was your question. What?
According to Tosfos, what other ramifications?
Can I marry her sister after I grow up? All these other possible things. Does she need a get if now she wants to marry someone else? Would she now need a get or would she need a chalitza? Right? So there would be all of those nafkamina. Okay, so if you look at Rashi, very fascinating debate. Rashi says, about 6 lines from the top, from the beginning of the narrow lines. He inherits her, his wife. So Rashi says, yeah, she's really the wife. It's just that there's no chiyuv of adultery. If you look at Tosfos, Tosfos says, appears because just the kukalo biyasa biel davar kna'al biyashal tamila. She did not ben teisha shabayivim to kna'al the kasha. Does they know midarabanan? That idea that it works if he's 9 years old is rabbinic. It's not biblical. So if you look at the end of Tosfos, like about 5 lines before the end, which says kolomar ilav, line subsequent ilav. Ilav haikra demiyataf. It wasn't the pasuk that excluded her from adultery. Havi amin, I would have thought midaraisa chashuva ki ishto. Okay, so this is the question. A 9-year-old boy, 10-year-old boy has sex with his sister-in-law, the Yevimto. According to Rashi, that's marriage. There's just no chiyuv of adultery. And according to Tosfos, it's not marriage. All right. Anyway, back to the Gemara. We still don't know if there could be yiyud for a minor. All right. So the Gemara says,
is that protecting them, or in other words, is that all to protect them? These regulations that it's not real, that it is real, that the adultery say from a minor.
What do you mean to protect who?
Well, in other words, if they were minors and there was a relationship outside of that relationship, then
Right.
they wouldn't be punished.
Right.
So is that a protection for them, basically?
Not understanding who's being protected.
These minors.
How are they protected? If this minor is married to this woman, and now you're saying that this woman sleeps with another man, hasn't committed adultery, I don't understand how the minor's interest is being protected.
Well, they're not being killed.
No. That's the other case. When the minor commits adultery, he's not being killed. That's protecting the minor, but obviously he's underage. This case is saying this minor boy is married to this woman through Yibum. The woman commits adultery, and she's not being killed. I don't understand how that protects the minor. Okay, it's a different.
The woman is over. She's not a minor.
Exactly. Okay. Tashma, come in here. I'm a Rabbi Ivo. I'm a Rabbi Yanai. Ein yud el begadol. Ein yud el midat. So we have a statement. Okay, it was a good question. We haven't really said how we know this, but Rabbi Ivo just makes the statement: yud has to be an adult. Presumably, we obviously mean the son. It's taken for granted that the father's the adult. Okay, it's only if he's an adult, and it's only midat. Tarti? Why do you have to say both things?
Exactly.
So the Gemara says, no. Matam kamar. What's the reason? Matam ein yud el gadol. Why is it that that the son has to be an adult? Because the son, presumably, now you're going to have to say he has to be made aware of it, but it also raises the interesting question, right? Do you see the father doing it? Can the father tell his son, hey, son, I'm making her your wife? And as long as the son's an adult and he informed the son, it works. Or do you see the father as being somehow appointed by this, like representing the son? So Rambam Paskins, if I remember correctly, that the son has to give his father reshus to be miyai, the girl. Okay, so how do you read midas here? You could read midas. I think that this works better. That if it means that the son is fundamentally the one who is marrying her, not just he's been informed, but it's his das that is doing it. Then obviously he needs to be an adult, and the father just can, just is empowered to do it. The son can permit his father to do it, and the father does it for the son. Okay, so if that's the idea that the son is really the one doing it through the father, obviously the son has to be an adult.
So that's like the sheet of Amalt Rishonot, that the father is really not being Makadesh because it's the son essentially who's doing it.
I'm not saying what have to do with Mos Rishonot.
No, in other words, let's say
whatever money is being used, the money that changed hands 3 years ago, or the remainder of the Av just now, the question is still
I'm sorry, that was about a shifra.
Okay. All right, so the Gemara said, okay, but anyway, but there is an interesting question of whether midas means you got to inform the son, or the midas means the son is the one doing the yiyud through the father, and then certainly that means that the son has to be an adult.
Does the girl have any say in this? Like, in other words,
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Okay, so the Gemara says, okay. Now, Yibais Ema my midas, and what? However, there's another way of reading midas. One is the son has to be an adult. Then there's a second halacha. Okay, it has to be midas. Whose das? Not the son. I mean, maybe also the son's das, but that's not the point. There's another das that's needed here. My midas tida. It has to be her das. Now, the important question is, what does das mean? Does she have to be informed, or does she have to agree and acquiesce? Okay, so let's take a look. Let's read the Gemara. Okay, so midas dida. The tiny Abai braid Ravavo asher lo yada milami shetzarich liyada. You have to be miyader. Now, obviously, what did you just say? Obviously, you have to be miyader. So the way that's read is it's more like lahodia. Okay, to let her know about it. Okay, Rashi says it's from lashon das. Okay, right? Where's Rashi? Rashi says lashon dea. Okay, so you have to make her. Now, but thus the words aren't clear what it means. So hutani la. So Abaye, the son of Rabbi Yavo, taught this brayta. For he explains what it means. B'kiddusha yiyud v'alibud Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. We're talking about kiddusha yiyud. Now it's according to Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. The Amar Mas Rishon Eslav Kiddusha Nitna. Now, what does this have to do? You see, that's what Dov mentioned before. What does that have to do with what money is being used? Because here's what we're saying is, look, if it was when the money originally changed hands. So when a father marries off his daughter, does she ever have to be, it was very nice they asked Rivka's opinion, but halachically, does she ever even have to be informed? She could be a 1-month-old and the father can marry off his daughter. So if it was when the money originally changed hands, it was the father doing it, and there would be no requirement to let her know about it. But if it's happening after the sale and the father's out of the picture, and it's not the money that originally changed hands, the Kiddushin is happening through the remainder of the service that's owed, then it's between him and her. If it's between him and her and not the father, so then he has to make her part of the process. Now, again, the question is, she's still a minor. Okay, how much of the process can she be a part of? But to some degree, she has to be part of the process, and that means he has to at least inform her. Whether it means she has to agree or not is less clear, but at least he has to inform her she's part of the process. And that would explain, if we assume that the Kiddushin is happening later, the yud is happening not based on the money given to the father, then you could understand that she has to be informed. Okay, so that's one explanation of it. Even if it was the original money that's now being used as Kiddushin, and it was basically with the father, no, it's a special requirement. You know what? Technically speaking, you're right. It was the money given to the father, that becomes Kesef Kiddushin. Nevertheless, if he had just been Mekadesh the girl, so the girl would not have to be informed, would not have to know nothing. Okay? But the Torah is telling you, and this happens through this process of being a Shifcha and then doing Yiyud, even though we're winding up using the money that we gave 3 years ago, for this only works if she is informed and she becomes part
Anywhere
of the process.
along the way, right?
Well, no, when he's going to do the yiyud, he turns to the girl and says, "Hey, honey, I'm miyayid you." Okay, so he can't just turn to the father and say, "You know that money I gave you 3 years ago, right? Now I'm deciding. I've made up my mind. I want to marry your daughter. We're going to do yiyud." Okay, he has to actually tell her. He can't just tell the father. So even though if it was Kiddushin, nobody would have had to have told her.
Yeah, we don't know
now
if she has
that
to
it's
agree with
yiyud,
it, though.
well, right. It's not clear at all that she has to agree. That is correct. Okay, I'm pretty sure take a look through it, but at least he has to inform. At least he has to make her part of the. At least he has to make her part of the process, which is a nice point. If she's becoming his wife, she should be informed about it. Okay, but it's not required by Kiddushin time, right? So anyway, let me just check the Rambam on this.
But we're still talking about a case where it's about the son who's a cut.
No, we're off. We're no longer
finished
about
with that. Now
Yeah,
it's the age
correct.
again. We're back to the girl.
Right. We moved from one discussion that the son has to be an adult and it has to be from the das of the son, and
Right.
now we're saying, forgetting the son, there's another halacha here that whenever there's
In
yiyud with
a
girl,
regular case of
Right.
yiyud, we're talking about.
exactly.
That was sneaky. They didn't tell us that.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Rambam says like this: the eno tzarich litain la klum shemos rishonos l'kiddushin nitnu. The eno miyayid shem kechas. 1 minute. The chetza miyada. No, hold on. Ein adon miyayid ami v'ya lo lo v'lo livno elami da'ata. Afa pi shekvar kibel avia ma'ota sharei hu yomer yada mi da'ata. That's all the Rambam says. It has to be mi da'ata. So does mi da'ata mean miratzona, or does it mean by informing her? Yeah, it's still left pretty
She
unclear
can't
about
object. So let's say she says,
Yeah, right. Nobody ever says she can object. So presumably, mi da'ata means informing her. If it meant miratzona, you would expect somebody to say that if she objects, it's not chal.
because we have miyun in other cases.
I know, but that's when it's by a rabbinic institution. It seems like the ata here means informing her, not acquiescence.
I mean, especially
Okay.
if it's the son. She can say, like, I don't know your son from home. Well, at least you have been in the house for a couple of years.
All right. Right, maybe maybe she wants to object to him because she knows what he's like. Okay, anyway, now the Gemara says like this. Okay, so we got the idea that the son has to be an adult. It has to be the das of the son, which could mean the son actually has to want it and permit his father to do it, which is the way the Rambam paskins. And it has to be her das, which might just mean she has to be informed, as opposed to she has to agree or acquiesce. All right, now the Gemara continues. Finally, we get to this issue about Mos Rishonos. Okay. My Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Who is this Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda that we're always assuming is the one that says that it is not the original money? Titania. Yada vefta. Shelo yada did not do yield or redeemer. Okay. Now, so the combination, the juxtaposition of yada and redemption tells you the following. It says Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda. Tzorch shehashahot biyom k'dei p'tiyah. You can only do the yield if there's enough service left on her contract that she could redeem herself. So there's at least a pruta's worth of service left. If there's a pruta's worth of service left on her contract, she could redeem herself with the pruta, buy her service back with the pruta, and only then does yield work. But if there's only 10 seconds left in the day, there's not a pruta's worth of service left after the end of 6 years, or at the last minute at the end of 6 years, and there's not one pruta's left of service that can be done, then you can't do yield. So why not? Presumably it's because the yiyud is being done with the service that's owed and not with the Mos Rishonos. So therefore there has to be a pruta's worth of service left in order to enable the yiyud. Okay? So Mikana Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, im yeshos biyom kidei lasos imo shavar pruta. If there's enough time left in the day at the end of 6 years to do a pruta's worth of service, mikudeshes. So the same way she could redeem herself with a pruta, he could do yield with that.
So
pruta.
it's his read, Rabbi Yossi's read of this pasuk that
Right.
establishes the foundation for his claim that the Malach Rishonot is the father's not Makadesh.
Exactly. In love, ain't a mikudeshes. If not. Alma kasavar and Moshe Rishonos lavel Kiddushin. You see, he's of the opinion that it's not the original money; it's only the leftover money, and therefore there has to be a pruta of leftover service left.
So he doesn't say, so he's not darshan smichut then, right? Like meaning.
He is yadav hefta.
I mean like exert the kata.
So that's the next response. If not Bar Yitzchak Amar, now here's the debate: does Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda really say it's not the original money? If not Bar Yitzchak says no, everybody agrees it's the original money. No. He could even hold that it is the original money that becomes kesef kiddushin. It's a gzeres agasur. because of the juxtaposition of Yadav Hefta, it says you can only do it when there's a pruta's worth of service left. But at the end of the day, you're not being Makadisher with the pruta's worth of service, you're being Makadisher with the original Kesef Kiddushin. Okay, so there's maybe one opinion. Clearly, the default of the Gemara is to assume that it's the original money that becomes the Kesef Kiddushin, but it's possible that Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda says that it's only the remainder money. It's possible he doesn't mean that. It's possible it's Xeris Akasa.
It's a nice limud on procrastination, doesn't it?
There you go. Amar Rav Amar Rav Nachman. Amar Adam would be Tok Tana. Now we're going to see what halachas we can infer from the fact that the Torah allows creates this reality of yield. And one of it gets to this question, which is, if the father's out of the picture, if we say like Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, that it's not the original money, this is the question that a number of you were asking, if it's not the original money and he's out of the picture and he's marrying her between him and her with the leftover service, or she's only a minor, how does that work? How can she accept the Kesef Kiddushin with the leftover service she's a minor? So Amar Nachman, Omer Lim the Bitok Tana, a man could say to his underage daughter, we learn from Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda that a man could say to his daughter, go ahead and accept Kesef Kiddushin, I'm okay with it. Okay?
In the case that she was sold as an Alma.
No, I have my 5-year-old daughter, I want to marry her off to you, Michael. Okay, and I say, go over to Michael's house, he'll give you some money, and I'm okay with it. That'll make you his wife. Okay, and that works. Now, obviously, it's not shlichus because I can't, she's a minor, she can't be a shaliyah. But she actually is the person who herself is mikudeshes. So I don't exactly have to make her shlichus. It could be her yad because she's the person that's the one that's marrying. My das, because I'm the adult and I'm providing the das, combined with her receiving of it, actually works. I get the money. Actually works to create a kiddushin. Okay. Now Tosfos has a bit of a problem with this because Tosfos says, I don't understand. How can she even be kona the ring? Right? A minor can't be kona anything. Forget shlichus. A minor doesn't have kinyan. So Tosfos says, well, a minor, maybe if dasacheres makne also, if you're intending to transfer Michael, so we have two things happening. Michael is providing the das to be makne her the ring. Okay. So that allows her, when it's put in her hand, to be kona the ring. Okay, she doesn't have any das at this. He provides the das plus her hand lets her be kona the ring. I provide the das that she should be married to Michael, okay, plus she did the receiving, and that makes her married. So it's our two dases working through her hand that's receiving it, okay, and that works. How does it work? Because in this case, the father isn't, she's the one getting back, as it were, the service. The father isn't in the picture, and she's mikudeshet. So that becomes the model that something like that could work in another scenario. Let's just read that. So Lav Amar Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Mosa Rishonos Lav Kiddushin knew that it's not the original money. The Chimushaya B'Shavei Pruta Have Kiddushay, and it's the remaining pruta of service that becomes the Kesef Kiddushin, and the father is not in the picture anymore. So the only it also would have meant the only way it makes sense is the only logic we can explain how can she enter into the Kiddushin if the father isn't in the picture is we must say implicitly from the fact that the father sold her, it's like the father is saying if at any stage he wants to marry you, that's what I want. I'm okay with it. So it's the father's das plus her receiving of her service back, and those combine. So the same way, if I sell my underage daughter, I'm okay with you marrying this guy. I'm providing the das, and she goes and she receives the ring. The combination of those two work.
Yes. Am I missing something by saying that when the Mishnah says Isha nickname Shlosa Drachim Kesef Shtar Bia, there's now a fourth derech here, which is Avdut?
Well, yes, except we're fitting it into Kiddushin Kesef. We're saying it's a type of a Kiddushin Kesef.
Well, except for the position that says that the Ma'ot Rishon.
No, because it's still saying the remainder of the service becomes the Shavar Pruta. And the very fact that we're now using this as a model to prove something about normal Kiddushin shows that we are refusing to look at this as an exception. We're trying to fit this into the normal rules. Right?
So there is that tension, though. There is that.
Right, but we are forcing it into a normal rule.
We're transforming Avdut into a monetary amount.
Therefore, we're creating either the original Kesef Kiddushin or a later Kesef Kiddushin, and then we're using it to teach me something about a normal type of a Kiddushin.
I'm annoyed.
I can tell my daughter.
Okay.
Okay. So, but everybody get the point? All right. I can have my daughter do it. I provide the das. She does the act. And we learned that out, that's the only way to explain what's happening.
You can just Makadish her to somebody and not say TV cup, it's cup. You just do it yourself. Here,
Of course, I can do it myself.
Right,
I'm the
here-
father.
right here, the
The
hot
finish
is
is
she's
that-
getting the.
That she can do the act as long as I provided the das, and we learned that out from this Kiddush year. Okay, Michael, my apologies to your wife about I'm getting you married off to my underage daughter, which I don't
You
have.
don't have.
Okay. So now the verse says like this: Aval Rav Amar of Nachman. So this Rav Amar of Nachman is again really like working with this, fitting this into normal Kiddushin and then making inferences. Hamikadesh b'malva. This is a more complicated case. Yesh aleha mashkon mikudeshes. So I'm going to read this way. Tosos reads this. Michael, let's say a woman. Okay, I lent this woman $100. She gave me some type of a collateral about it. I don't know, her iPhone. Okay, I've got her iPhone. I'm holding on to it as collateral. And then I tell her, Harayat Mikudeshet Li, I'm being mochel the $100, and Harayat Mikudeshet Li, and that works. Okay, because she gets hana because I was mochel the $100. Now, what does that have to do with the iPhone as collateral? So Rashi says I'm Mekadosh with the iPhone or whatever. Anyway, Tosfos no. It says you're being Mekadosh with the malva, with the milva, with the loan. So Tosfos only says no because I might have thought that as long as I'm still holding on to the collateral, maybe there's not enough gemar das. Like, what does it mean that you were mochel the loan? You haven't given me back my phone yet. Okay, and nevertheless, even though you're still holding on to the collateral, if you're mochel the loan, that you can be Mekadosh with the hana that the person gets with the waiving of the debt. Now, where do you know that from? Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, again from our case. Lavam Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, Ma'aser Rishonos Lavu Kiddushin. The original money is not the Kesef Kiddushin. So therefore, how do we conceptualize this? This girl now, underage girl, she owes me $100 left of service, right? She's been working for me for 5.5 years. She still owes me $100 left of service. So that's like a loan. That's money that's owed to me. She's going to pay it off with service, but that's money that's owed to me. Okay? Hi Helvahi, it's effectively a loan. It's not a purchase, it's a loan. So this also gets to the question whether Eved is Gufo Kanoi, because we're looking at it as a loan and not as a service. But he owes me $100 worth of service. He Gufa Mashkodi. Now, what's my collateral that I'm going to get my loan paid off? I have her in my control. Okay? So therefore, that's my collateral. She owes me the money, and I have her herself as collateral, and she's going to now do the service to pay that off. And now what do? I say to her, I'm waiving the remainder of the $100 you owe me. I am giving it back to you, as it were, for Kesef Kiddushin, and that works. And so that's I'm being Mekadosh with Milvet. I'm giving her back the money that's owed to me, okay? And I'm holding on to the mashkan. I'm holding on to her, okay? And therefore, so therefore, and here too doesn't work. Now, of course, it's not a good comparison because in one case, I'm Mekadosh the woman and I still have her iPhone in my pocket. In the other case, if she herself is the collateral, then when I Mekadosh her, I am giving her back the mashkan. I'm no longer holding on to her as a shifcha, as a type of a collateral. Okay, so it's a very complicated case, but nevertheless.
Up until this last second, I thought we were now talking about a regular case of Kiddushin, but now we're talking about a katana again. It's the shift. What's the proof of a miya'id?
No, we're learning from the case of a katana to apply to a normal case.
So this is a normal case of Kiddushin with a milva and a mashka.
Exactly. But it's still a very weak comparison.
So they're extrapolating from the whole year.
That's the whole point, like we just did before, by having my katana be makabel because of Kiddushin. If we are trying to make this not an exception and fit it into Kiddushin, then we'll be able to infer other halachas of Kiddushin from it.
I thought Rabbi Yossi was a fringe opinion. Now we're saying, from Rabbi Yossi you can learn this. We're saying just according to him, or now we're saying that we actually hold like
that's a good question.
Meaning, are the Chachamim disagreeing about how Yid works, but in principle they would agree with all the other assumptions that get dragged along with his position? Or maybe the Chachamim would disagree with all those assumptions as well. I don't know. You're right. It's a good point. It sounds like Rabbi Yehuda is saying, Rabbi Rav Nachman is saying, like, no, the only debate is how Yid works, but all these other assumptions maybe are agreed upon. All right, let's try to get a little bit further. Tanu Rabbanan, Keitzin Mitzvahs Yid. How does Yid work? Omer Lavi Pnei Shnayim. Now, notice again, going back to your point, though, that we are making this fit into the norms of Kiddushin. We had to identify what is Kesef Kiddushin. So the next question to ask is, where's Eidos Kiddushin? You need Eidos. Where's the statement of Harayat Mikudeshet Li? So we're going to put all that into the place. Omer Lavi Pnei Shnayim, Harayat Mikudeshet Li, Harayat Mureset Li. Okay, we make this into standard Kiddushin. Afilu b'sov sheish, even at the end of sex. Afilu samach l'shkias chama, 1 minute before sunset. And from that point on, she's your wife. She's not your slave.
You can presumably say Avraham Yuedeli too, right?
Right. That'd be a good thing to say in this case. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer, again the Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, in Yeshos b'yom kidei lazos imo shvav pruta mikudeshes imo aveinu mikudeshes. No. There has to be a pruta worth of service left. Now, mashal, could be you could like an analogy to this, a case that will teach you about this is la'omer. I'm going to again read this like Tosfos, like another Tosfos. La'omer leisha hiskachili me'achshav lachar shloshim yom. Marry me from now, starting now, and it'll end taking effect in 30 days. And somebody marries her. So it's a kiddushin that began now and ended 30 days from now.
Meaning what? You want to be married for 30 days?
Well, whatever. It's unclear. The effect of the kiddushin starts now and finishes in 30 days. So then the obvious question is, at what stage is she fully married? And if somebody married her in the interim, will that interfere with this? So we're starting with the assumption that in that case, here's the halacha. Shemekudeshes l'risha. Okay, so if it's me'achshav la'achar shloshim yom, the halacha is that since it was me'achshav, it enough began now that if another guy tried to marry her afterwards, that would not override. She's enough married to this guy now. Now, okay, that's all very lovely. What's that telling us? So that's going to tell us something about kiddushay yiyud. So let's just read one more line in the Gemara. Mashal leman, what case of the kiddushay, or to whom is this mashal informative?
Oh, sorry, Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is not saying mashal. That's just the Gemara putting
the Breita. If it's telling me from this case, it can teach me something about Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda's case. Whoa, 1 minute. Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda says the whole kiddushin only begins at the moment of yiyud with the remainder of the service. There's no comparison to ma'achshav lachar shloshim yom. It didn't begin and finish. It all took place at that moment of yiyud. So I'm a Ravaka Braid Rav. No, Mashal Rabbanan. No. It's teaching me something about the Rabbanan. For the Rabbanan, it is like a me'achshav lachar shloshim yom. You give the kesef of purchase, it becomes kesef kiddushin, but the kiddushin doesn't really take effect until 3 years later, 5 years later, at the moment of yiyud. Okay, so everybody see how that's analogous, right? The money changes hands 5 years ago. The kiddushin finalizes, at the end of 5 years. It's like me'achshav lachar shloshim yom. And therefore, what this mashal is telling me is, what would be in a yiyud case? Listen, this is a very interesting case. I buy this girl, okay? I have yet to do yiyud. Michael comes along during the 3.
You haven't made the statement.
I haven't made it. I made the statement. She's been working for me for 3 years. I haven't made up my mind yet. Michael comes along and Michael says to her, Harayat Mikudesha. By the way, he says to the father, Harayat Mikudesha. Okay?
Can I do that?
Can he do it? Does that take effect? Or if at 2 years from now, before the 6 years is over, I say, you know what, I made up my mind, I am the yayin. Then it turns out that was the kiddushin began 5 years ago, and Michael's thing did not. So that's what the mashal is telling me. The same way, me'ashav lachar shloshim yom, if Michael tries to interfere, it does not take effect. Here too, if Michael tried to do something before I did the yiyud during the service, and in the end I do the yiyud, it does not take effect. It becomes like a me'ashav lachar.
Only according to the Rabbanan.
According to the Rabbanan. So first one says pshita. Isn't that obvious? It's not obvious. No. Ma'od tema halo amar la me'ashav. In the first case, I said me'achshav. I had made up my mind that I wanted to marry her. It started now, and it's going to finish in 30 days. In that case, obviously, Michael can't interfere. It already began. But in this case, I didn't say the word me'achshav, so maybe the whole thing only takes effect 5 years from now. I used the original money, but it takes effect 5 years from now. Maybe it doesn't even begin now. And I haven't even made up my mind yet that I wanted it to be kiddushin. So I might think that Michael can interfere in that case. Kamash Malana. What we are saying is that when I say 5 years from now, I'm miyayid you, that turns the whole case into me'achshav ula'achar zman. That the kiddushin began when the money changed hands, and it finishes later. And if somebody tried to interrupt, it does not ruin it. It does not interfere with it. Okay.
Does that mean like l'Rabbanan yesh breira b'yiyud?
I mean, something like that.
Something like that. Okay.